process, yeah.
So I don't think I ever noticed. I guess maybe because you're sitting to my side usually.
Yeah, and then, I mean, in council, I don't wear them unless I'm reading stuff, so.
Okay, so we're on, right?
We good? I think we're good.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I think I'd like to tackle today, we have two things on the agenda. The first one is the Village Code of Ordinances recodification. So with this, it is a deep pool of lots of items. And so what we're doing today is discussing process, because I don't even think each of the items will necessarily take place in our committee, even if some things need to be changed in the code. So we have been talking about doing this for a really, really long time, and multiple methodologies are possible. But I think the more realistic one is that we have had some people from the community, some former council members who are really familiar with the code book, and then some attorneys who are open to helping us and willing to help us review some of the code. So in some of our code book, you know, we've seen that things contradict each other. If something's in two places, it just got edited in one and not in the other, and it's just a clerical error, but it nonetheless is confusing. In other places, it's kind of outdated. Like the dog catcher I hear about a lot. We don't maybe need a dog catcher anymore. So
Don't let Kelly hear you say that.
I know.
Right.
Like Kelly is specifically forbidden from this meeting for that. Anyway, if she really wants that job, I can make her. I'll make her a t-shirt. Anyway, so I think what we generally, and this, Marcy, I'm not telling you this like you can't disagree. I want your opinion. I'm just telling you what's gone on in the past. Like I'm thinking that I have a list that I have just recently compiled into a spreadsheet. And then now as I dig through years and years of email, I'm finding more and more things from other community members that they have told me about. And then I'm also just listening to people talk and being more sensitive to it lately and adding things of my own to this spreadsheet of items that we want to look at. So Dennis Wolters contributed a list. Rob has a list. I've had an ongoing list for years. I'm going to check with Eric because he and I had an ongoing list together, and I'm not sure I have all of his items on there. And there's some other people that have items to contribute. So we're making this list. So Marcy, if you have any, and I'm going to put it out to the larger council also, if they're finding things that are ambiguous or difficult to deal with. And even Ed too, since he's our attorney, like if he's finding parts of the code book that are difficult because they're either not giving him enough guidance or they're trying to be too narrow and we think it may not be in compliance, we'll talk with him also. And then the next step is to have some people review various sections of code, whether it's, you know, related to the items that they want to see fixed and they have ideas about how to fix it, and then submit it to us and we'll start to work through it that way. So that's kind of where I am right now. Rob had some thoughts too. Do you want to talk? I know we've talked about this before.
I think you've captured it. I mean, again, there's a list of stuff as you go through the code book, you just come across things. I mean, Dennis said to me about how in the code book we say bicycles can't be on sidewalks, but bicycles are on sidewalks all the time. And that's one of the things I think I personally wrestle with is, and Bill, you and I have talked about this, there's stuff in the code book that we don't apply, you know, and I have, to me, it's either enforce the code or fix the code. One of those two things. But in the past, it's been a little arbitrary at times about what gets applied and what doesn't get applied. And I think we need to get back to either following the code book. Well, no, we have to follow the code book, period. But we should then, if there's something wrong in there or we're not following it, either decide to follow it or fix it. One of those two things. It just,
I mean, yeah, it's been an ongoing discussion in council and out of council. You know, it's lucky that, you know, we're not being stalked by somebody dying to sue us. But if we were, I mean, it is kind of a dangerous precedent that you set, that you enforce pieces of your code book and not others, because then you sort of render the pieces that you do enforce negotiable. And then we could be on the hook and in trouble if, you know, we're not enforcing something and somebody were to get hurt. So there's just, we either need to live by it or get it out. If it's not useful and it's not serving us, then it doesn't need to be in there. So do you have any thoughts, Marcy, about it?
I mean, I'd like to see your spreadsheet so I can look
Oh,
at
absolutely.
it and
Yes.
see, I mean, I gotta admit, I didn't pore over the Mariemont codes looking for inconsistencies prior, even really know about the existence of the code book prior to being elected. So, and
Yeah.
just as a resident, I don't particularly have any areas that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure they do exist.
Mhm.
And then I haven't had, people complaining to me about it or asking me about that at all, but it's not like I've been out a lot.
Right. Yeah, and it will be a public list as soon as I get it cleaned up and put a couple more things on there. Just today, somebody asked me on the street about something, and I was like, oh yeah, that needs to be in there. And then when we were talking about the swimming pool fees, they're actually codified. And I know that there are other places that don't codify fees. They just have, there's a fee schedule available in the office, or there's a fee schedule available at if you're talking about the pool, if you're talking about tennis, the tennis association. So, we can get around having to pass ordinance upon ordinance every time we make a change in little administrative ways by cleaning this up and just making it a general guide. There are philosophies about how these things are supposed to work, but I think it's, for a small community that doesn't need to be spending our time picking over a code book all the time, we might want to make it a guide and then have administrative things live outside of that in, handbooks and in, where in the administrative offices where they belong, like at the pool or at the tree people or whoever, MPF, if they're applicable. So,
and I guess I would suggest too, like once we have the spreadsheet, prioritize, what is the most glaring?
Yep.
And I guess that's the job maybe of Rules and Law Committee to do, is to prioritize it and then maybe farm them out as applicable.
Yeah.
I would support uncodifying. I don't know if that's what decodifying, what the verb is, the pool fees, just because, it's likely in the next, few years, we're going to want to be able to adjust that easily. Wouldn't you agree, Rob?
Yeah. Because one of the things I agree totally. And one of the things with when it's in an ordinance too, the process for ordinances are normal. You're normally supposed to have 3 readings at 3 meetings, and then it takes another 30 days for it to go into effect. So if we wanted to change the pool fees, you'd have to go do it back before, and then you have to do it before it goes on sale. So you'd have to go change the pool fees back in like February or March, so that it'd be in effect in time. So I totally agree with you. Yeah, let's get some of that other stuff out of there where we can.
And I guess I would say, sorry, Rob, if you want to finish. Okay. And I guess I would say, let's prioritize the things that are going to benefit us financially first, like the pool.
Well, also don't forget about the fees for the building, for building permits and those types of fees.
I pretty much have all fees are on. I mean, like, why wouldn't a fee schedule live? Building would be with Don, pool would be with Jordan, tennis would be with whoever runs tennis. Like, I don't know why it needs to be. I mean, there are different ways to look at this, and some people want everything written down in one place. But to be really clear, I mean, rules and law over and above all of council, we live in the code book, right? But council itself pretty much lives in the code book. If you're on council, people have asked me before, like, well, how was I supposed to know that? And I'm like, well, with an eye roll, it's in the code book, not that you would have been reading it though. So, it's something that when it's something that a resident, it would just ask a question on a Saturday morning. Hey, I wonder if whatever, it should be someplace accessible. And then these details can live in those places. And the code book itself can be the guide for broader issues.
Yeah, and cleaning stuff out of there, like dog catcher and things, because it's overwhelming. The code book is huge.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Well, never mind the times where you thought you had to put the same language in 2 separate places. I mean, that all.
So any opportunity I think we have to streamline it so it is more accessible for residents, I think would be a big plus as well. So, again, like taking out dog catcher, or we did this before with the thing about referencing the park sports, like just have it in one place. So it's not in 2 different places and then get out of sync and things like that. So
don't forget about the floodplain manager.
Got it. That's on there. Floodplain manager. Isn't that you?
Someplace.
So one question I would have about this, I mean, I agree in principle. I've said that I think we should prioritize the things that are losing us money so we can maximize that. But I'm wondering, how much it costs us to do that versus how much it gains, like right now today.
Right.
Does it make sense to pay Ed $1,000 to do this now, as opposed to maybe later, just because that's a variable expense that we can control?
Well, here's the way I'm approaching it. So
Or do we set a budget for a year, like
right.
X number of dollars to improve the code book?
Yeah. So the recodification of these items that we're going to do, these are all items that trip us up on a regular basis. So I think that because this recodification effort for us to clean things up and make things make sense and modernize our language and the topics that we address within the code book is separate and apart from the recodification where we send the whole thing off to American Legal and they cost $12,000 to recodify and put a new copy together. So we're putting off that larger expense. But I think the prioritization of this list, in my mind, you're correct on financial. The other thing is just these quick hits. Like there's so many quick wins in here that cost nothing for us to just get them out. We can do a batch of them all at one time, like the dog catcher. And then glaring gaps, like for instance, with the demolition stuff. Like we're working on that anyway. So let's make sure that when we do it, it's good, it's clean, it's ready to go, and it's in force. And then in a year, hopefully in a year, when we have the money, we'll have all of these things amalgamated for when we're ready to codify, in the sense that we're ready to send the package off and then have a clean copy. This is a living document. It will never be all the way done, but we would be wasting our money and not being good stewards if we were to send it off now, knowing that we have all of these things to do. And so many of them are just quick wins where we can just deal with it and then have it modernized in a year.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm justifying the expense. And I don't think it's going to be all that much.
One of the other things we can do, one of the things we've done in the past in rules and law to keep costs down, is we actually take a first cut at what we think the change should look like. So instead of just giving it to Ed and saying, hey, can you come up with something that does this? We take a first cut and then he reacts to it, which shortens the amount of time he spends on it then.
Yeah.
So that's another thing we've done in the past within rules of law to help keep those costs down with Ed. So.
Yeah. So this is another, to go along with what Rob's saying, we're kind of benchmarking other communities. Like we've both been deep, and some other people in the community have been pretty deep in reading various other code books of other villages and other villages who have a setup like ours when it makes sense. Like if they're about the same size, or they don't have an administrator who handles a lot of the stuff. It's direct mayor and council. And then also the ones that have a historical district, like when we're talking about, the stuff like we were talking about yesterday in our meeting with you. So we're trying really hard to cherry pick the good parts of what other people have and learn from others, rather than creating this from scratch. Because when we've done that, the product is clunky and wordy and weird and hard to understand. And there are some really good code books out there. So we've been trying to use those and then take, 2 or 3 communities and take the good ideas from each and put them into ours, and then make sure, that it's constitutional and Ed approves, and that it's as streamlined and easy as it can be to read. So that's what we've been doing. That's our process to save Ed all that time. Plus we know what we want. He doesn't always know exactly what we want. And then he'll put something together and say, okay, this is what I have. What do you guys think? And then that's it. So he doesn't spend too much time.
Can I ask a quick question about the code book? This is just, I remember Bill saying once that we don't allow ice cream trucks in Mariemont. Is that codified? And
is that a solicitor? Is that why? Solicitation?
Yeah, I think it falls under the solicitation or something. And usually when we let them in, we make a special, permit or some damn thing. You give them a 1-day or 2-day pass to let them in.
So
okay.
We let Kona Ice come, but we don't let random ice cream trucks from who knows where drive through.
So Kona Ice is allowed, because I just saw the truck the other day and I wasn't sure, and I'm not going to be that council person who in the middle of a pandemic says to kids, you can't have your Kona Ice. But I did wonder.
They either come and let us know that they're coming, or if somebody's having like a street party and we close down a street and they have Kona Ice, or like when Kona Ice came to the Mariemont like birthday party last year and the fireworks and all that kind of thing, we know because we invite them, or the people who ask us to close their street or have the birthday party or do whatever has told us about it. So I think there is actual official paperwork.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have to come in and file for a permit. I mean, or, you know, permission from the mayor or somebody to actually come in, but it's usually on a one-time event kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the driving, roving ice cream trucks are not, I mean, I am completely open to discussion on that topic because I personally love the ice cream truck, but I have heard arguments against it.
That whole issue about the ice cream truck kind of a thing, I think it was back during one of those kid scare episodes, and all of a sudden, you know, all ice cream trucks were gonna nab your kid and take off with them. So I think that's where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe it should be loosened up. I don't know.
So we can add it to the list. Let's put
It's
it
on the list. It is on my list because I'm totally good with an ice cream truck driving by my house. But
And then I have another question, and if this isn't appropriate for this meeting, then just tell me. But I think you two are people I would want to ask this question to. So, you know, kicking around all this stuff about the pool reopening and trying to make it more financially feasible, if the restrictions should lessen later in the summer, I was thinking, you know, we could do a food truck. And then there are these groups called, they're called DORA groups, and they basically allow alcohol in certain areas of a designated part of a district. Is that something we could allow?
oh yeah, we've had
By the pool?
We've had like they call them adult parties, where it's like an evening that they close it to the general public, and the people who bought tickets can come, and it's 18 and over, or 20, it's usually just grown-ups. And they'll like grill steak, and they'll allow you to bring your own alcohol. So we pass legislation to allow that to happen. So if we wanted to do that one night at the pool, we could just pass legislation, let the trucks file for permits, you know, so the legislation would say, okay, to have alcohol at the pool, and then the permits would be issued to the food trucks who want to come, and we could totally do that. That's fine.
But they couldn't sell alcohol.
I don't know, Bill.
I don't believe we've ever sold alcohol. It's kind of a bring your own bottle kind of a thing. And I think actually it's limited to wine and beer, right?
And I wasn't talking
don't
about the
remember.
village of Mariemont. I was talking about like a 50 West truck or something.
Yeah.
We've had discussions. Somebody wanted to do a party before all this went down. They wanted to do like a party down at the lower 80 if it was dry enough down there, and have a food truck, which I'm not even sure we could fit through that tunnel. But if we could have a food truck and have 50 West come down there and have like a volleyball game or something fun for people to do, to kind of raise funds for the lower 80 if we needed them. So it's been discussed before. I don't know how far it's gotten, and I've never seen anyone selling alcohol. I've never even looked that up in our code book. I don't know. It would take an extra insurance policy, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you got to get something from the state. You know, the whole deal about getting even a temporary liquor license, I guess we could look into that.
I mean, these
There's
trucks
got to be
do
a snake
it.
someplace.
Yeah, the trucks do it, so it's doable if we wanted to do it. But this, yeah, we can talk about that in another.
Well,
meeting.
no, actually, I don't think that should be us. That should be Health and
Yeah.
Rec, right?
Yeah.
Because that's who's Joe's the one who's working with the pool commission, and the pool commission is the one who comes forward and asks us to do those dates and set them aside. It's usually like 3 or 4 nights during the summer when they ask to do that. So, I mean, our plate's gonna be really full going through what we have already.
Yeah.
And again, Joe's the one who's working on working with the pool on how to get it open properly and all that kind of stuff. And that's always historically where the requests for adult night or whatever goes through also. So
Right.
I would, again, our plate's gonna be really busy.
So that could go through them to come to council to allow whatever they want to allow. Is that
that's
what
what's
you're saying?
been done in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And honestly, a lot of times with the grown-up party, because it's such a known entity, it's been going on twice a summer or 3 times a summer for a while now. A lot of times the president of the pool commission at that time would just come petition council for that permission. But if this is a new deal and it needs to, you know, have a code review to see what we do and don't allow, I think it should go through that committee for sure.
They were always very popular, though.
Mhm.
They were. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's a good idea.
Yep.
You attended a lot of them, right, Bill?
I did. Even when I couldn't drink because I had babies.
Well, I mean, another reason I brought it up, because it's like one of the buzzwords in economic development now are these DORA, that it's a designated outdoor recreational area.
Yeah.
And have you heard of that, Rob?
Yeah, it's because it's like Louisville has a whole street for that kind of stuff. So yeah, places are starting to designate areas where you can walk from out, in the street carrying your
Adult,
alcohol,
yeah.
go from place to place.
So
yeah.
anyway, that kind of came up on my list, and from an economic development, and Wyoming just instigated one, and I think there's 17 in the state of Ohio. So
We should be one. I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, we can look into it.
I know that, I don't know, I know you're in touch with a lot of the MPPG people, Marcy, just on a separate note, and then we'll move on. But I don't know what they did that was formal, but there were 2 nights over the past couple of years where they had an event. It was like a mom's night out where you would go and have appetizers at the inn, and then the boutique that had been in the Strand, and then the engraving place or the embroidery place. Like all of them were open, kind of that whole line of stores was open.
yeah,
And pomegranate and lime. And so you were allowed to take wine, or some of them were serving wine. And I think they said it was okay to carry it between stores. So I'm sure they did something formal, and it wasn't permanent where it was a designated area for this, but it was for the evening from like 7 to 9 or whatever.
all
So
right,
you-
well, I'll reach out to them. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of an overlap area, and I just
Sure.
thought I'd throw it out.
I mean, if you do some research on those, and that seems like something that Mariemont should have, and you have an idea of whereabouts it should be, I think you should put it in our committee for sure. I think it sounds like a great
or it could be economic development. I mean,
Yeah,
either
again,
way.
I think it would be Economic Development Committee.
Well, yeah, and then I guess yeah.
but that's our committee too, Maggie, because we're both in that too.
All right,
so-
good. I get to do it either way. Okay, so on to the awful part. So I called Bill. I just want to say this to everyone out loud. I called Bill and I said, I am going to send a notice for something that sounds horrific. And it's the item on my list that I've been dying to get off, which says prohibiting mayor and council from sitting on the ARB. This is a holdover from a different, more contemptuous time on council. I'm not sure if I just made a word up.
Contentious.
Contentious, sorry. So I have reviewed several communities' code. Some have been more helpful than others, and I'm going to list them for you and then briefly run down what they do. And then this is up for discussion. And I just want to start it here that I don't necessarily want to kick the mayor off of the ARB. That is not where I'm going with this. This was from a different time with different things going on. But so I reviewed Wyoming's code. I'm also going to tell you why they were or were not applicable. So Wyoming is a city and it has a charter. So it's a different animal. It had less helpful stuff, which I'll explain in a minute. I reviewed Glendale, which is similar to us in a lot of ways in that it's a village and it is not a charter. I looked at Harris Park also. They weren't particularly applicable. So here's what I found. Wyoming, for an ARB, they have an advisory board to the Planning Commission that acts as their ARB. It is not limited to historical areas in any way. It simply talks to the city government via the Planning Commission about changes, and they look at purely aesthetic architectural details. It is made up, and I mean this very, very specifically, and you'll understand, they are made up of 3 members who are all registered professional architects. So when I say they're looking at architectural details, I literally mean plans, like details, not paint colors, not anything else. So that's what they do. Aside from that, they have a historic preservation commission, which makes recommendations directly to council regarding legislative action related to the way things look. It's 4 residents, some people from the staff, a representative from council, a representative, one of these architects from their ARB. And then they also have a Wyoming Historical Society, which I'm thinking it must be something with MPF. So they have a rep from that society also. Their charter, if you look at it, it's the polar opposite of what we have. It is a PDF document that is not very long and does not give a ton of guidance. So all of this I found on their website where it spells it out. And then they have no ARB section in their charter specifically. This is a board that lives outside of the charter. And I don't know if there's like an ordinance that made it that's on file someplace else, but it was not referenced at all. So, oh, I also looked at Bellevue, Kentucky. So Bellevue, Kentucky has a historical, they're also a city, so it's not as applicable. They have a historic preservation commission. They have some nice language in there. They also have a planning commission. And their ARB is appointed by the mayor. It is approved by council. It's 5 members total. It has 2 members that must have expertise in a related field. I did not write out the big list of things that were considered related, but it was basically contracting, architecture, planning, city planning, design, zoning, real estate law, real estate sales, and that sort of thing. So they had an exhaustive list of things that counted as experience. And then the other qualification for the other folks was that they have a demonstrated interest in historical preservation, with no detail as to what that operational definition is, but I think it's clear enough. So that is what they have. Let's see, we're all pretty familiar with what Glendale has. So Glendale has one board. I like theirs a lot. It's very clean. And I talked with their mayor a little bit about exactly how it works because I didn't know. It is one board that is the Planning Commission and the ARB together. It has the mayor, because of the ORC, is required to be on this commission because it's the Planning Commission. So there's rules under the ORC that dictates what the Planning Commission looks like, how big it is, et cetera, what the terms are. They've also ruled in their ARB. So their language specifically says that the decisions that the ARB will make with regard to aesthetics has to do with the historical landmark properties, their historic district, which it sounds like they have one, but I didn't look at their map to make sure. I think we have 3.
They have a historic district.
They just have 1, whereas we have like 3. And then it talks about contributing properties. So they're a historic landmark village the same way we are. And so their ARB looks at things related to the properties that are contributing to that designation. So what I liked about this one very clean board, and I'm not saying we have to go that direction, it's just, it occurred to me that over time, we've had some stated problems with our boards. One has been, we have trouble getting that many people who are qualified or interested to be involved in them. So it deals with that problem right off by having fewer people. And they also have, when I talked to the mayor, he walked me through who is on their board. They have a nice kind of smattering of professionals on their board. So their chair is a real estate attorney. Beth, who we are familiar with, Sullenberger, is a historical preservation expert. He also said they have a contractor who he liked to say, he was kind of funny. He said, he deals out a dose of reality every once in a while. When we get too picky about things, he'll say, well, that's all fine and well, but it doesn't make sense in this case. He'll also, give help to residents when they say, well, we're going to do these wood casement windows. He'll say, well, you can also do this other type of window. It totally meets the guidelines. It looks really beautiful and it'll last a lot better and weather better than wood. So he's appreciative of that help. So the mayor sits on that board. So in that way, the mayor sits on the ARB because it's the Planning Commission. The mayor sits on the Planning Commission. He told me he is an ex officio non-voting member. He says he doesn't even really like to be a part of it, but he has to be because of the ORC rules. And he said that because of that, he doesn't vote in any appeals that come before council. And in fact, their code states that he is not a tiebreaker in the council if there is a tie on appeal, because he's already expressed his opinion in this original board. So they're the most kind of salient example, since they're like us in every way. They're a village with historical districts, and they also have their historical board. So that's my research. That is what I have. If there's a whole, I mean, we could go a lot of directions. We can, I don't necessarily think we need to resolve the issue of how exactly to structure our boards today, but I do want to talk about it. And I also, I think one of the other failures in the boards that we have is that we have a lot of overlap between these boards and council. The mayor's on both of them. Often the mayor has sat as chair of both of them. We have a liaison to council or from council on the ARB, or I'm sorry, on the planning commission. And often we have council members on the ARB because either they're part of MPF like Marcy is and have been on it for years and now they're on council, or for whatever other reason. So there's kind of like an incestuous relationship there when somebody gets to vote in a board and then they're also who you come to for appeal. It doesn't always appear to be all that fair. So I'm gonna quit talking now and let you guys go.
Can you send some of the stuff out that you've?
Yes, this is what it looks like right now. So I'm gonna make it prettier. Sorry, I've been like phone calling.
First of all, Meg, I have a question for you, because you said that this had kind of been sitting there from a previous time.
Yeah.
But from the agenda on January 13th, that wasn't under rules and law, and then it appeared in the February 10th.
Maybe it's just been sitting on people's lists.
It came about when people came to talk about the changes we were making in planning commission. Bill, you remember that? We had people like Mike Lemon and prior council members come and speak to council. And this is what came out of that, was asked to go ahead and put this on the agenda from that.
Yeah, was that like around the first of the year?
It was the
Yeah,
first
you
year.
remember that? You remember that, Bill, when those people came?
Well, I do remember. This is when you were trying to throw me off the planning commission. I do remember.
Well, and so to be clear, the meeting kind of was devolved into like, it devolved into one side versus the other. And so when I was saying to Joni, hey, can we put an item on the agenda or on my agenda to discuss these boards and how they're structured? She's like, essentially she was annoyed and she was like, so you want to throw Bill off the, off the interview? And I was like, just write down whatever you want.
I guess procedurally, can you put something in your committee without having us vote on it?
Yeah, well, Bill agreed to put it in there. Yeah. So the mayor put it in there.
Well, again, at that council meeting, when all those people got up and spoke, we all agreed at that time to go ahead and put it into the Rules and Law Committee.
Then. Let me say this, Maggie. The thought kind of occurs to me. You've done a lot of work here. You've done a lot of research, and what other communities are doing sounds interesting. I'm just a little concerned that I mean, I know our current setup is not probably potentially the best, and measured against what, I don't really know. I just don't want to see, it's like the patient's got a cold and you guys are looking to euthanize the patient. So isn't there possibly just a more moderate fix to our setup?
Yes. So it's all up for debate. Yeah. These are my buckets that I want things solved. I think that it's not because it's annoying me, it's because it's a design problem. I'm tired of hearing that we can't staff our boards with qualified people. I don't want to hear that anymore. So if we need fewer people on the board, or one board that does two things, because they're so married together, these things are so together, that it could be a solution. I want to see expertise. I don't want to have to hunt down an architect to put on the ARB. Like, I want to see it be less, whether it is or whether it's perception, I want to see it less political. We've had people quit the boards. We've had people not want to be on the boards, very qualified people who would be really good board members because they're like, this is a political mess. I'm not doing it. But that's not what it should be. Don't
you think that going forward, given the sort of the different makeup now, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Possible.
That we're
maybe
that situation will become self-rectifying and will become somewhat easier going forward. I would feel that there may be more people willing to come forward because there's a new complexion in the village in terms of council and others.
I hope so.
It might be, self-rectifying. And one other thought about this, I think you guys need to bear in mind what planning does and what the ARB does are basically two separate and distinct things. Planning is essentially a zoning that decides issues of zoning and variances thereof. ARB decides, ARB decides issues, of architectural integrity, materials, those kind of issues, not necessarily zoning issues. And I do think that there is something to be said for keeping, sort of a separation. If this gets down into one particular board or committee, you've got a concentration of power, not a separation of power.
Yeah, and I think also that combining it would make it more political as opposed to less political. Because, on one hand, you wanted to look at taking off the council and the mayor, and I understand that that's how it was a long time ago. But then if you combine it, and then you've got the council and a person and the mayor on it, even if the mayor doesn't vote, I guess I don't follow that logic. And the other thing is, I'm kind of wondering why we're looking at this again, because you, I think you were the only one who's still on council who voted to expand it in the first place. Is that back in 2016, I think it was?
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, I wasn't going to fight that vote because I didn't see any problem with it at the time. I don't understand why it needed to be. It doesn't matter to me if it's 8 people or 7 people or 9 people. It just doesn't matter. And unfortunately, what we would lose if we go to one board, because ORC dictates how big it can be, is it would be smaller than I would prefer it to be if we went to one board.
I would totally support trying to get qualified architects and seeking out that expertise. I know for sure we have right now on the ARB, I keep wanting to call him Christopher Wren because that was the famous architect, but his name is Peter Wren.
Architect.
Yeah, he's an architect. I have a list somewhere of the members I put together for this. I don't know what happened to it, but Mike Kittner, what is his background?
So he's a developer, and what's interesting about him being on the ARB is he should be on planning. And so this is the other thing, is that if we could just get, and I'm not necessarily advocating for only one board, this is just another reason why it makes sense to me, is like, why do we have to pick and choose and manage where people go? He was put onto the ARB because there was an open space and he was reasonably qualified for it and willing to do it. But really, if you look at his background, he should be on the planning commission. He would be an asset on the planning commission. And he's even said, I would totally do the planning commission. It's kind of more in line with what I do. So I must push back on Bill. Yes, these functions are separate and distinct, but the people who have these skill sets are somewhat overlapping. And so I think it might be a cleaner way to go about it. Now, that said, we're not talking about combining these boards today at all.
One of the things though, Bill, is if you go into the Codebook, there are parts where if it has to go from the ARB to the Planning Commission. So sometimes, and you remember when the stuff on the square, when Spinweber called out the fact that we weren't following the right process.
Right.
And we also didn't at the time, we weren't fulfilling what was in the Codebook, that there has to be an architect on one of the boards. So we were running those back in the day, pre-you on council, pre-you on as mayor.
I know what you mean.
We weren't following the rules. Once again, we were not following the rules. And it was called out to us by somebody who's trying to get something passed. And so I think opportunity for simplification should definitely be something. And if I remember correctly too, the reason the boards was expanded for Planning Commission was because they couldn't get enough people to show up to the meetings. They couldn't get a quorum.
Rob,
that was the problem.
Over the summer, and that's kind of the reason for the ARB business. Over the summer, if we have to have a meeting, either ARB or Planning Commission,
really? Yeah,
on vacation, so on and so forth, you can't get a quorum up. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So that was why they added the people to the Planning Commission, was just because they couldn't get enough people.
You mean the ARB, the plan?
No. Rob is right. There was an interim period in there about 2 years ago, I think it was, where we unlawfully, wrongly expanded the Planning Commission from 5 to 7.
To get a quorum, yeah.
At some point, the mistake was recognized and we fell back to 5. And unfortunately, and I don't know I'm gonna be careful what I'm saying here, that reconstituted 5 didn't work out as well as it could have. Let me just say it that way.
Right.
So, okay, so since it's quarter till almost, all I want to do is reiterate, we're not kicking Bill off of this committee. Like, I am completely fine with.
Not today, huh?
And Marcy.
Right. So I propose though that, so I don't know if I printed it all out or if I brought it downstairs. I may not have brought it downstairs. There's code that is I believe it's Glendale's, and I think it's someplace else also, where it does state, I know Glendale's does for sure, that the mayor is no longer a tiebreaker on appeal when something comes to council, once it's gone through. Now they have that combined board, but we need to look at our code, and we can do this, finalize it in a separate meeting to see what exactly our code says. But I'd like to do that. I'd also like to state that the mayor, I don't know, this is up for debate. Maybe this is an either or, is ex officio on these boards.
Yeah,
Because I have no,
I do. There is a thing. I have heartburn with the idea that whether it's the mayor or council, if somebody has voted on something in a commission, planning commission, ARB, I don't care what, if they voted for something and then somebody comes to council and appeals it, then to me, anybody who voted on that in the planning commission or ARB shouldn't be voting on it again.
Well, the mayor,
They already stated their position.
the mayor wouldn't have a vote
Right. Well, and they wouldn't be a tiebreaker either then.
unless there was a
Actually,
tie.
that's-
And you guys
Well,
around
I
with
mean,
the tie. It wouldn't be a tie.
You could say that the mayor doesn't have a vote in the planning commission. I mean, because there's 7 people, there's no way it can be a tie there.
well, there can, because if you are on the commission and you vote, then you don't vote in council on appeal.
Is that how our code is now, or?
No, this is how the cleaner, nicer code works. Basically what, and so this is a,
Because I would approach it the other way. I would say you don't vote on the other, but you can maintain your vote on appeal.
then what help are you to that board?
Yeah, you got to be able to vote on the board.
Then you're ex officio. Then you become an ex officio. You're just there
And then-
to participate in the conversation.
All
again.
right.
You're kind of a waste of
I'm just
I feel
trying to learn.
you have to, in
It
the
could be
strategy of the game, you kind of have to take
So then
your,
what do you do if there's a tie in council then?
Well, again, mathematically, so the thing would be, if you say whoever's, because both ARB and Planning Commission have both mayor and council on it. If the mayor and the council member vote on an issue on either one of those boards, then there's only 5 people to vote on council. And so 3 versus 2. So you can't have a tie.
Can't have
It
a tie.
becomes a moot point.
Yeah. I don't
So-
think.
So
you can't-
again, mathematically, it works out all okay. And again, I think really principally, I hate to say this, but morally, I think it makes sense that we don't have, that somebody's not voting twice. They already expressed their opinion, and the only reason somebody's appealing it is because they voted in,
Then why do we bother to change our code from 6 to, or from 5 to 4 then?
I'm sorry, say that again?
because that's the standard. We aligned with the standard of what people do. You mean on appeal?
Yeah.
Yeah, we aligned with
And
what,
then can you give me an example of one such appeal, like where this has been an issue?
did Lisa come to us? Did Lisa Larkin come to us for appeal? Or
No,
did we
not
have
for
to go
appeal.
through the whole process again?
No.
It hasn't happened. I mean, honestly, this isn't something that happens on a weekly basis. This is just to deal with the issue if it occurred.
Did you guys see that my friend is here?
I know, I love your friend.
She always comes, she, for some reason, doesn't like to be, she likes to participate.
So what I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, what Glendale does is the mayor is on the board, but ex officio, and yet also does not break the tie. We can negotiate that. I don't think there's any rule. I'm okay with that, either way. What I want to do is look at this from everybody's perspective. Look at it from the mayor's perspective, look at it from the council and the board's perspective, but most importantly, look at it from, like, I am a lady who bought a house down the street. I'm doing some work to it. I'm just moving into this neighborhood. Do I feel like this is a clown court when I take something, to the ARB and they say no, and I feel like they have a legitimate error in their logic? And then I come to council and it's the same people sitting in those chairs looking at me.
Well,
all
for
over
ARB,
again.
people only have to come before the ARB if they live in the historic district.
Right.
And then the problem really, and Bill and I have discussed this, is that the ARB doesn't enforce well.
No, I agree with that too. I totally agree. With that.
I mean, so, and I got to tell you, I was one in my first meeting, we let some things that I would have said, no, I would vote again, because here's this homeowner who came and already, their excuse is they already bought it.
Right.
And, Bill and I talked about, this was pre-pandemic, is communicating very strongly with the land, the owners and the leasees, or owners, if those are condos, I'm not sure quite how those are they're all set up, is that, look, we're going to start to enforce this. So you need to come before us before you do something.
And I completely agree. We've been weak on enforcement. We haven't been proactive. And I am 100% behind MPF's gripes about that and what's happened as a result of us not enforcing things. I feel very strongly that we need to get our fundamentals in order before we go down that path, so that we are a competent economic, and I mean that in terms of time and paperwork and everything else, organization. We need to have, qualified, correct number of people on this board. We need to have the correct ordinances that are clear and do not overlap in place. It needs to be an efficient process. It needs to be a process. It needs to be a recorded, communicable process. None of that is really what we've got right now. So before we buckle under and really start enforcing these things.
So what I would propose, Maggie, is that, one thing that rules and law should do is look at these two different boards and try to streamline how they connect, like Absolutely. To Rob's point of, Spinweber, Greiwe, or whoever it was, you said, called us out on not following our own code.
Well, that is part two, and that's a separate issue that I want to put into my committee on Wednesday. But for tonight or today, is it night yet?
Yeah.
I'd like to resolve this issue. I know, is it yet? Is it time?
Is there another meeting after this?
No.
Okay.
But I don't want to kick the mayor off of this board. I just want to. Can we decide that, please?
Yeah, no, I'm all for that.
Okay, so I'm going to write down, we're keeping mayor. I think our next question that I hope we could answer tonight is, and we can talk more about it if we're not in agreement, but is it okay to keep the mayor ex officio on this board?
Here's where I would go with that.
I'm not, what do you mean? I'm not already?
Well, you are, but by choice.
No, what are you talking about?
Are you decided to be a non-voting member, right?
No, I vote. Okay. I just decided not to be the chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sitting as the chair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Maggie, where I'd go with that was, I would say, let's as a group, let's talk about this as an option, because I'm open to either way. I mean, it's just like what Marcy was saying before. You can have two routes. You can say both and it's not just the mayor, it's the council member too. So right, both the mayor and the council member are either ex officio or they vote. And if they vote in those groups, then if there's a appeal that comes to council, they don't vote a second time because they've already voted once on that issue.
Right.
I see that as being that's a better option right there, Rob. I think
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Not flexible, I don't care.
But when they come, if they should ever come to council for an appeal, number one, the mayor already doesn't vote, but the council member that sits on that committee, I would totally agree, they shouldn't get a second vote.
I would be fine with that. I think that's only fair. I think that's only fair.
So I think that solves the problem. Again, where I have the angst is where, again, anybody, not just mayor, anybody getting to vote twice on something.
Yeah. Right.
I would totally agree with that, and I think that's a really great process that we went through, and
again, and if that plays out that way,
especially since we haven't had any cases of that ever happening.
Not in a while.
We might.
I'm just kidding. I was trying to make a joke. That's all.
Yeah.
But as we tighten things up and begin to enforce, you have to understand, we're not going to have cases if we never, we say, oh, you shouldn't do that, but go ahead, we won't look. Or we're going to give you every variance you ask for.
Yeah, that's true. And that's something Dan was really lax on. Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. So
okay.
I think what I'm hearing too is I think all of us, all four of us on this call, agree that we really need to enforce the law that are on our books. I mean, Bill, it was amazing when we were over there with Chad the other day. I mean, just looking around, it's like, oh my goodness, you can see stuff that's not being enforced. So
it's over there in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think Maggie has a good point that as we start to enforce stuff, there may start to be more pushback.
We're going to get people mad. I mean, people are going to get mad about it, and I get that. It's your house. So the other, let's see. So the other piece I'd like to say, and I feel like you only need to say this with certain kinds of people, but they're the kind of people who read code, is that the mayor and the council member are required to vote on that board and required not to vote as part of the appeal board.
Yeah.
You don't get to pick where you vote, right? Because you know
But
where
you
the
could-
votes
but you
lie.
could still abstain, correct? If you.
Yeah, but if you abstain, you don't get to vote as part of the appeal board. Your
That's
job as
That's
part of
fine.
that board is to fill that chair and do your job there, right?
As I said, I wouldn't get a vote anyway. So I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah, well, yeah, you wouldn't. You're right.
if you
Yeah.
want to write it in that way for the council person, I think that's fine.
Okay.
And just one last point. I mean, obviously, when somebody comes in for an appeal, the mayor gets to speak, but
Of course.
I vote. No, yeah, okay.
No doubt, no doubt. And so and the thing that works well with this, if we follow this path, is if there's only 5 people voting anyway, so in council, if there's 5 people voting, there is no tiebreaker required. So that sort of
Mhm.
helps.
Right.
So my last concern is that I think, if I'm correct, at one point or the other, and I think it was the ARB, not the Planning Commission, I'm pretty sure at one point we had 2 council members and the mayor on it. Wasn't that right, Bill? Like, weren't you and Marianne and Dan all part of the ARB at one point, or was that planning?
I don't think it was ever planning.
And it must have been the ARB. So my concern is there we can have a tie. So if we I guess what I'm getting at, to be more succinct, is can we ensure that there is a maximum of the mayor and only one other council member on the ARB at any given time?
Yeah, Maggie, the way that it works basically is that obviously the council person is put on the planning by Ohio Revised Code.
Right.
And the person that is to sit on the ARB according to our code
Yeah.
is the chairperson of zoning and planning, that committee chair.
Right.
How it's written in the code. You're not supposed to have 2 council people on here.
Well, it has happened before, though. Just because, somebody
Get rid of
wants to be on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're all in agreement again that, yeah, there should be one mayor, the mayor and a council member, one council member, and that's it on both.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it sounds like we're
Can I blow it up? I'm going to do this because this is my job in the world, I think. I would prefer, because ORC puts the mayor and a council member on planning. I honestly know Marcy's interested in it, and Marcy, I'm not even going down the road of kicking you off of it. But I mean, it doesn't make sense to me necessarily that we have a representative on the ARB. We've gone years without it at various times. Do we want to make it so that we don't have? I mean, the reason I'm asking you is in literally no other places where I've done research, the places up near Columbus, the places over near Cleveland, and any of the places that I listed off earlier, there is none of this overlap of council being on boards. They hardly ever overlap. In Glendale, the only person that overlaps is the mayor is on the planning/ARB because of the requirement of the ORC, but there's no council member beyond him on there. He kind of fills that role. He's the mayor and the council member who is that person on that board. And I would love to go down that path in our own, because it helps distribute the leadership and the expertise.
One point on that, though, Maggie, is that, Mariemont's historic district, is such a strong feature in this village. I mean, it's fundamentally part, some of the points I was making yesterday, being a fundamental point of the character of this village.
Mhm.
Having the chair of zoning and planning on economic or on the ARB, I mean, it makes partial sense. I mean, and just because, again, I know we keep, hearkening back to what other communities are doing. Let's let them hearken over to us, see what we're doing.
We were doing a better job than
I
Mike.
don't see why it would be necessary to do both.
Oh my God.
I just don't see why it would be necessary to do both. If you've basically, given them one vote in one place,
Yeah.
then why not? Then
I'm just asking.
You've done away with the double jeopardy of the situation.
I'm just putting it out there. The other thing is, if we
Well,
do,
I'm putting it right back.
I'm happy to take it. If if we want to pick a person, does it make the most sense that it's the chair? And again, Marcy, this happens to be you. I'm sorry, you're the new kid and I'm like picking on you and it's not personal. So does it make sense that it's the person who's in charge of the planning and zoning committee, or does it make sense that it's a resident of the historic district?
We already have a requirement to have a resident of the historic district.
Okay.
PRB.
So maybe that person could just in practice not also be a council member, because I know that's how it happened with Marianne. Like she was a resident from the
I
historic
don't have a
district.
problem limiting it to one council member.
Okay.
I don't.
I thought we already decided that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, okay, that's fine. Like if we end up with district representation by some fluke again, and we have, you know, a council member who's a resident of the historic district, but it's a different person from the person who's the head of economic planning and zoning. Let's just keep the economic planning and zoning person and let a different resident from the historic district be on the committee.
You know what? We've never, to my mind, we've never had a problem getting a resident from the historic district to be on. It's Brad.
Lockhart.
Yeah,
Brad
well,
Lockhart.
it's on now. Mhm.
Okay.
And he's a pretty good member.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
All right.
actually, in that meeting that I was talking about, he was one of the ones who wanted to be super tough.
What'd you say, Marcy?
I said, actually, in that meeting that I was talking about, the only meeting I've been in on as a member of the ARB, he was tough.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, then that's what I'm gonna write up, and then I will put it in a report for, can I still get it into Wednesday's meeting? I mean, do we have a noon Friday deadline this week since our meeting's on Wednesday?
You see her tail.
I know, I love it.
See your tail. Yeah.
Do you know, Bill? Because I was wondering the same thing. So the packet doesn't go out till.
No, the packet's already gone out. The packet,
No.
yeah, the packet
But
went.
can't you bring it in paper and write it?
Okay, I'm gonna bring it and I'm gonna sit it at everybody's desk and we're gonna vote on it. Is that fine? Can we add it to the agenda and have a revised agenda, please?
I've already been, you know, we're going to have a discussion. I don't mean to get off topic here, but we're going to have a discussion on Wednesday's meeting about the pool. And that's not in the packet right now, but I'm just adding it.
I guess I changed I'm living in the old world. I'm not going to sit it at everybody's chair. I'm going to email it to everyone so we can remotely discuss it on Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay.
But yes,
That's right.
living in the old world still.
Hey,
Okay.
I got a haircut this week.
Oh, stop it. See my gray?
I got a haircut yesterday too. What do you think?
It's lovely.
Good.
Very
Oh
short.
man, I liked it long. I liked it. I,
You know,
I, thought you were gonna go for
I
the
was digging it long too. Yeah.
the ponytail. I thought you'd go for the ponytail.
Have you seen Ryden's hair?
Yes, it is so long.
Yeah.
So Maggie, can you? But yeah, if you can send us some
Right.
materials too, that would be really good.
Send you the notes. Yes, I'm happy to do that. So I have my yellow piece of scrap paper that the kids were cutting out things from, and I have my planner that is retired now, thank God. So I'm going to type all that up.
In email, can you give us an email the links to like the other code things that you've looked at?
And in fact, I've been downloading them and putting them in little snippets. And because I think going forward, we may discuss more aspects of this. So I have saved them for you and I have a nice little file for you.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, okay, so I've got all that. And so that is going to be my awesome Friday night quarantine activity, writing my report and emailing you links.
Cool.
Okay.
She's sitting right here and
Yeah, we can see
Boring.
her. I see her.
That's so cute.
What-
kind of hard to take life
the
seriously.
meeting?
What'd you say?
Are we about to end this?
Yeah, I'm finished. Can we adjourn? Is everybody good? Do we need to take a formal vote, aye and nay? So do you want me to summarize and we can say yes and no?
Sure.
Okay.
I think
So-
just to be official, we should.
Okay, to summarize, if the mayor/council member votes in the commission, which now we've decided they are required to vote as a part of the commission, then that person would not be voting as a part of the appeal board. We're keeping the mayor on the ARB. The mayor and council member vote as part of the board and do not vote as part of the appeal board. So that means the mayor is not ex officio. The council member must vote as part of the board. This was important. I wrote it down multiple times. And only one council member can sit on the ARB at any given term. I say yes. Marcy?
I say yes.
Yes, Rob?
You know, you said something there that made me think about something, Bill, you and I have talked about. I think it's great that you've said you're not going to be chair of the committees, because I think it's great to empower the residents of this village to get more involved that way. I wonder if that's something we should also be thinking about is, do we want to go ahead and codify that to say, because again, Bill, you know, in the past how things were working, because he would come to you and say, are you going to nominate me for the chair of this committee?
I know. Just let me say this though, Rob. I'm not sure it's a good idea to sort of codify that in this regard. Currently, I am sitting as chair on the planning commission, but I'm doing that because of, you know, we have 2 new newbies on there, or actually 3. And Shelley Reed, of course, she wanted nothing to do with it. So that by default, I mean, it sort of had to be me. Now, at the start of the coming year, however, I'm going to basically say, you know, please do not nominate me to be chair. And they'll vote somebody else on to be chair. What I'm saying is that if you exclude the mayor from being the chair, and we were ever to be in this situation again where we had too many newbies, you're going to have an older member be the chair.
So this is something I didn't want to touch during this meeting. In a lot of these codes that I've been reading, and I'm not certain it's part of what I printed out, but I will find it again if I need to. There are several communities that in their code, and it's not embedded in any of these places, it's embedded like in kind of the powers and duties of the mayor, that the mayor will not serve as a chair of any board because he's the mayor. And there's some really good, I might have even written it down in one of my million places. There's a really good sentence that talks about that, and it's really clean. I'll have to pull it out of wherever I put it. But it doesn't need to be codified here. And if we don't codify it here, but later decide to codify it in the powers and duties of the mayor, because it's on my spreadsheet, we've talked about this for years off and on, and it could go for the whole everything. Go ahead.
I have a question. Yeah, I mean, like, I just don't understand why that's important. I mean, yeah, okay, other communities do it, but if if the mayor's on there and he has a vote there, I mean, that's basically their power. The chair doesn't have power over other people on that board.
It's to distribute leadership. It's just one philosophy of running a government.
Well, of course.
I guess I would agree with Bill I mean, I see your point, Rob. Okay. I mean, I totally get that. I just don't know that we need to.
But remember this, guys.
Make it a legality.
The chair is elected. The chair is elected by the board.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, and look, I
no
know,
previous discussion.
They also decline.
Exactly, I know you guys can make a hell of a case about the history and stuff like that. But I would just hope that going forward, because we're trying to establish a new flavor around here, that the boards will appropriately elect the person best suited to be the chair.
So
case, like I said, I already told them on the ARB, please do not nominate me.
He did, and Peter Wren is our new chair.
Great. So totally do not disagree with a single word you said. When I have written up roles and responsibilities documents in my career, the goal that it's hard in some cases and easy in others, is when you're writing a job description or roles and responsibilities, often you're writing it knowing who you're writing it for at the moment, because you're kind of working backwards to organize a team, or you already have a candidate you want, and so you're kind of going after them. But the challenge there is, because it's an organizational thing, you are to render out the personality of the person. So while I think there's some perceived or real backlash against past personalities, I don't want current people who have personalities of their own to take it as a personal thing that we're trying to write code, because we're writing code to control, like, after most of us are retired or dead. Like, this is going to go forward, and yes, it can be changed, but that's the way I want to approach it. I don't want to say, well, you're a very benevolent leader, and so we are going to let you have more leeway than a less benevolent leader. What we're writing this for is a position, not a person.
But I think
that's kind of how I'm approaching it.
Well, and I see it differently, because I see it as, you want that board to function, and that board should be able to promote the leader that they want. And if that happens to be the mayor, and like in Bill's case with the planning commission, temporarily, and then that's fine. But
Well, we can
by
always
the same token, Bill can say, no, I really don't think that's appropriate. I think it should be somebody other than me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it's talking, I mean, I guess it's like you're taking away some of the power of the board to govern itself, is how I see it.
I think if you have a lot of really qualified people on the board, you don't have this issue. And that's kind of like where I'm back to getting the fundamentals in order.
Well, I think I would agree with you about the fundamentals of the ARB. I mean, I don't want to be overly strict, but I think it's a good idea to have, I don't know, Bill, are there current specifications on the ARB?
We just wrote, yes, did I send you that? We just tightened it up a little bit, and I can send you the new legislation. It's the way it printed out is like every other page and super wacky, but I'll send it to you. You can still read it through the old language right next to the new language. So we did tighten it up a little bit, but not really. Like, we didn't make requirements. We made suggestions about what we'd like to see for expertise on that board.
Yeah, I mean, an architect lives in the district. That's about it, really. I mean,
we did make something in the new legislation about requiring some kind of continuing education.
Yeah. I'm wondering, when we conclude here, can we stay up?
Yeah, I don't know. Gigi?
Yes.
So let's end our meeting. Can we end our meeting and keep you, Gigi, for a minute?
Yeah, but you had to do the actual end the meeting.
Okay.
And then I can leave you here.
So we voted. We're going to end this meeting. It was rules and law. Let's see, what time is it so I can timestamp it. 4:09. Thanks everybody for coming.